I think an unleashed leader is somebody who truly feels fearless. They feel they have the autonomy to be provocative, to challenge the way things are done. They are confident in their ability in using their voice. And there's somebody who is going to show up consistently. When you unleash somebody's potential, you open up space for them to not be risk adverse, for them to feel supported and given autonomy to go do great things. And I think we need to unleash more leaders regularly than we are right now.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. We are excited today to be joined by Lisa Sterling. She is the Chief People Officer at Perceptyx. She's based out of the greater Minneapolis and St. Paul area. Today, she is going to be sharing her superpower as a provocative leader and how does she apply it across a variety of roles that have led to her ability to be successful in multiple organizations. We're also going to talk a little bit about the opportunities that technology has to both listen to and nudge some leadership evolutions based on insights driven by the effective use of technology and artificial intelligence. Lisa, excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, Lisa, tell us a little bit about your origin story. You had a great way of getting motivated about the kind of leader you wanted to be and why you wanted to be it. Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. My journey is untraditional, I will say, in terms of getting to where I am today. I started off in sales and loved it. My mom used to always say to me that when she would go to conferences when I was little, that bid me well and made a start in my journey in sales and really loved it. I was selling into an HR organization, which at that time, and probably still today, was predominantly ran by women. If you look at a lot of CHROs, they are strong female representation. The challenge back then is they weren't seen as strategic leaders. I would walk into rooms to present the offerings to the C-suite. And while the CHRO was the ultimate buyer, they weren't the one having the conversation with me. It was the CEO. They were predominantly men. And so over the course of that journey, I took different steps in my career to start to make myself a more rounded leader. I loved selling and I loved being a sales leader. But what I realized is that's just one piece of the pie. There's all these elements that make an organization work. And I knew if I wanted to someday be an executive leader, I was going to have to learn all elements of that business. I was also intrigued by the fact that we would sell into this HR organization and they touched so much of the business, but so little attention was really put on how we were creating experiences for the hundreds, tens of thousands of people that were calling that organization their employer of choice. And so that started me down this path. I joined Ceridian to be a product leader. I had gone from sales into operations, managed some large customers, got into the product side and fell in love with being able to create technology that made people's lives better, made their lives easier. Somebody said to me once, you sell a payroll system or you're building a payroll system. How is that making anybody's life better? And I said, let me tell you, you're building a payroll solution, like it's paying people's paychecks. That's not provocative. But when you build technology that truly enables people, Judy can leave work now on a Thursday night at 5 p.m. and go home and sit down for dinner with her husband and her children because the system is doing real-time payroll calculations versus her being there till 9 o'clock. You make people's life better. It started to create this fire and this burn inside me that I wanted to be more provocative in terms of my leadership. And I didn't feel I needed a title to do that. I was going to do that in whatever I was doing.
You choose to take that on.
The tipping point for me, I remember this day so clearly. I was on stage in Las Vegas in front of 500 or 1,000 at our Women's Network event. And I was talking about the inequity that there was at the time between the US men's national team and the US women's national soccer teams. And I started out with a slide behind me that showed my three favorite soccer players, which are my three daughters. Those three people are the people that make me leap out of bed in the morning and want to create a better place for them. And it was at that moment that I was like, I need to go be a chief people officer. I need to go do this and I need to change the future for those three humans that were on the slide behind me. And I am not perfect, but I believe in this philosophy of progress over perfection. When I get up and I'm making a decision, whether it's about an employee experience or about a product, I vet it off of my kids. Would my three daughters look at this and say, this is advancing our ability to have a strong voice, to have a strong stance, and to break down walls that have existed for years? And so everybody finds that thing that causes that burn or that fire in them. For me, it's being a mom to three incredibly amazing young women. And it's why I am where I am today. It's why I push people to be uncomfortable, because if they're uncomfortable, I feel like they're doing the things that will make a better place for my girls to grow up in the future.
Yeah, that's really making it personal. There's no better motivation than a personal motivation, and tying it to the three children that are going to carry on your legacy and each of their own unique ways. They're all yours, but they're all different, but yet they all share a common opportunity to be able to grow. So tell me more about how you've come to define this notion of provocative leadership.
I don't like normal. I've always been that person who wants to just stretch and make people around me uncomfortable. I believe that when people are being provocative, they are making those around them feel uncomfortable in a positive way. When people are comfortable in what they're doing, they're not pushing the limits. They're thinking outside of the box versus throwing the damn box out. I hate when people say, well, let's think outside the box. Why do we still have to have a box? Can't we just get rid of the box? Let's just start fresh. Let's look at not what we need to do today, but what we need to do for the future. And I try to instill that in the people that I have the honor and pleasure of leading. I've worked for a number of CEOs who did that to me and really gave me the space and autonomy to go be really creative. When I first stepped into the chief people officer role, it was David Ossip at Ceridian who tapped me on the shoulder one night and said, hey, I'd love for you to take over as our CHRO. And I laughed hysterically. I was like, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. I'm not going to be the compliance officer. I'm not going to be the cop. I'm the rule breaker. Are you kidding me?
I love that you just said that. I'm the rule breaker, because I actually said to him, I said, David, some of the things that I push people to do, somebody might say that's out of compliance. I push people in a way that I don't want people to not realize their own brilliance or get into their own genius zone. And sometimes you literally have to pick a person up and throw them off the cliff to get them to fly. When he said to me, listen, I'm giving you a blank canvas, go do something amazing. That was the moment I ran downstairs and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to become the CHRO for Ceridian. And he almost fell off his chair backwards.
What year was that? Things are changing as we speak. So when did that happen?
This happened in 2015. For our company at the time, it was a very important moment because we knew we needed to have a radical cultural shift. We were not anywhere close to being a great place to work. We had lots of things that were headwinds for us. And we had a goal to have a strategic exit in 2018. And so we had roughly 2.5 years. It was the hardest and the most rewarding 2.5 years of my life. Nothing worth doing is easy.
Absolutely. I'm a big subscriber of the obstacle's the way, and I have all the lessons, scars, and setbacks and unfortunate situations to prove it. One of my things is God doesn't give you anything she doesn't think you can handle, and she's got one heck of a sense of humor. Okay, so Lisa, I want to be provocative for you. All right, so I'm going to challenge you here, and I know where this is going, but just for the listeners out there, they might be feeling a little confused because there's been all this talk about the importance of leaders providing for psychological safety, making sure that people feel included, they feel like they're belonging, they can be vulnerable, they feel supported, they feel heard, all these things. We've been going over these very skills with some of these prior podcasts. And then now we're talking about being provocative and making them uncomfortable. It seems like a paradox. Now, you and I both know paradoxes are only just a limit of perception. If you zoom out far enough, most paradoxes resolve themselves. So articulate a little bit about how does this notion of making people uncomfortable, and you qualified it in a positive way, throwing them off a cliff, but with knowledge that they will be able to fly. You've got these little caveats in there. How do we reconcile these seemingly polar opposite leadership principles, and yet they actually go hand in hand?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I haven't figured it all out yet. Listen, I'm a big believer, and I've seen this work very well in multiple organizations. There does need to be friction, especially in the HR or people organization. People don't like to talk about friction in the workplace. And I'm going to use an example. At Perceptyx right now, we have 6 values, 2 of which are almost in complete contradictory fashion with one another. We want to make sure that people come to work every day and they feel safe. They feel like they have a platform to have their voice heard. They feel like they're included in decisions. They have that inclusive nature and a sense of belonging. On the other side of that, we also have a value that talks about challenging the limits. And that value is all about challenging everything we know. And back to what I said earlier, not thinking outside of the box, getting rid of the box, and having truly the space to ideate and be creative. Those 2 things rub themselves at our organization frequently. And even as of late, our CEO, John Borland, and I have had conversations with our entire organization on our town halls that we recognize that. Like in one breath, we want to lean in and we want to wrap our arms around you and make sure you have all of these things. But at the same time, we tell people that we want them to take risks and we want them to be uncomfortable. And yet, when they fail forward, we sometimes penalize them. That's not the right way to go. We need to create a space where they can challenge the limits at the same time, knowing that we as leaders are going to care about the whole person. This comes down to your leaders, though, right? It's one thing to say these things and to have these beliefs that are foundationally part of who you are as a company. You have to be meticulous and deliberate in who you select as leaders because there are behaviors that leaders have, or in some cases don't have, that can entirely disrupt this and not allow for people to truly be provocative in a safe space. That's one of the things we talk about as an executive team frequently is as we're thinking about selecting a new leader into our business or looking at an emerging leader and advancing that person into their next role, we have to be thoughtful about what behaviors those people bring and what they don't bring. When you think about being provocative, it's a behavior or a strength of leaders. Some leaders simply don't have it. That doesn't mean they're not a great leader.
Yeah, maybe they provide the air support and a member of their team has the opportunity to be that leader. And when you look at the 5 exemplary leadership practices, right smack in the middle of that is challenge the process. Ronald Heifetz, the Kennedy School of Government, has this metaphor of the pressure cooker. Your job as a leader is to be enough of a you know what disturber where you are stirring the pot. You're raising the temperature, you're raising the heat, you're making things uncomfortable because that's how chemical reactions happen. By the same token, not raising it that the pressure cooker explodes because then it becomes destructive. I had another gentleman by the name of Greg that I worked with in a challenge course back in college, and he had this model of the comfort zone, which is actually not bad because you can have high performance when you're on automatic pilot, but it's risky to stay there. Then you have that challenge zone or that learning zone. And then outside of that circle, then you have the panic zone. So whether you use the pressure cooker or the challenge zone metaphor, it's this notion that as a leader, your job is to agitate sufficiently, but not excessively. And that's different for everybody. And it's different at different times. I think the operative word then is if you're going to do that, you've got to be willing to accept a level of experimental error. And for that, I welcome new mistakes. If it's a new mistake on the basis of a kinetic attempt to do something different or to challenge something, you got a ton of grace for that. If it's a repeat mistake that's been talked about before that has destroyed value, that has been disruptive or disrespectful to somebody or things of that nature, product or people impacts, then no, there's not a space for that. And then there, we need to be courageously dealing with those issues too. So is it A or is it B? And I think it's more of a concentric circle model. And it's finding that sweet spot where optimal performance and learning and growth can exist.
It absolutely does. It's building and weaving together the essentials of a highly performing and highly efficient and effective team, right? Because back to what I was saying earlier, you can't have a bunch of very provocative people all trying to move things forward. I think one of the things that we do so incredibly well at Perceptyx on our leadership team is there are the people who play that provocative role naturally. I've watched too many leadership teams not realize their full potential because they try too hard to get everybody to fit together. We build our team by finding the behaviors, the attributes, the personalities, the opinions, the experiences that add to that team. And it allows us to gel in a different way. It allows each of us to realize our own individual, but then collective potential as a team. And when we have to go down these paths of driving radical change or being super provocative, everybody knows their role that they're playing in that. And sometimes I watch us switch hats. That is the benefit of having the right team makeup. And it allows us to throw out this mindset that some leadership teams have, which is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's nothing that infuriates me more is when somebody comes to me and says, that ain't broke. Why are we fixing it? And I'm like, because you could build it better.
Doesn't have to be wrong in order for it to make it better. Imagine if they had said that when they had the abacus. They're like, look, it works. We can count with this baby. Imagine doing payroll today with Roman numerals and an abacus because somebody said it works.
No, and I think about the business we're in, right? Like way back in my early days of being in survey research, I remember being downstairs in our fulfillment area at our office till 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, printing and folding paper surveys for 50,000 employees and shipping them. Some people still want paper because of the dynamics of their workforce, but if we hadn't evolved, can you imagine how much wasted time we would have as humans?
Yeah, that's time you don't get back and time that doesn't add value. Lisa, I want to throw you a little bit of a curveball here. This is a topic that has come up a couple of times in my experience with some of our amazing female change agents. The majority of the agents in our organization, majority of leaders in our organization are females. And what I have discovered is that some of them are very specifically concerned about being a provocative leader because of a fear, of a limiting belief that says, if I'm a provocative leader as a woman, then I'll be perceived in the light that I don't want to be associated with. And so therefore they play way back beyond that line. And I'm like, you're not even close to that line. You have so much further you could go before you even broach it. But that's a limiting belief. And it's not just a few, it's definitely many. So this is a request on their behalf. How do you frame it in your mind to give yourself the permission to be a provocative leader without that fear? What do you do to help yourself and allowed yourself to make that happen? Because clearly you're a courteous, kind, loving human being. There ain't no doubt about it in my mind. How did you do that?
Whenever I've stepped into an executive room, into a boardroom, into just a leadership team, I've continuously kept my three daughters at the back of my head. If I don't blaze this path, then who will? And I ask this of people all the time. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? And I say that to my team all the time. If some new hotshot came in and replaced you tomorrow, what's the first thing that person would go do? Go do it. And I think about that every single time I walk into a room, because if somebody else came in and took my job and walked into that room and said what I had wanted to say all those years, I would be pissed at myself for not being the person who said it, right? And somebody else comes in and does it. So here's what I have learned. I am a highly passionate person, but I'm not highly emotional. I am a very data oriented individual. And so when I'm walking into a room, I don't care who my audience is, I make sure that I have all of the right knowledge, data, et cetera, to be able to sit down and have a healthy and interactive, effective debate with the team. And I say debate because most of the time, these conversations aren't just conversations. We are debating, we are having healthy conflict, we're collaborating, we're causing friction. But I keep going back to who, if not me, is driving this forward. I think part of the reason I've at least experienced in my past where I have seen my peers at an executive table or in a boardroom be unsuccessful is where they come at things highly emotional versus with data and matter of fact. It's very hard for a CEO, a CFO, a CCO, whoever, regardless of gender, to sit down and not be able to look at data and have an intelligent conversation around it and recognize that the data is telling the story, right? And so I don't come at things because it's in my stomach or in my gut or in my heart.
Yeah, that might give you the energy, but you're channeling it through the objectives, the goals, the facts, the data.
Absolutely. And I know this is easy for me to say because to your point, there's probably lots of women out there who feel differently, but I'm not fearful about how I'm perceived. Some people won't even get close enough to broaching the line. Why will you not broach the line? What fear is holding you back? And let's solve for that. Because do you really want to work for an organization where you have so much fear that you can't come and step shoulder to shoulder, head to head, toe to toe with the other leaders in the room and add value? Maybe it's just the way I was brought up. I had a very strong, opinionated mother and father. And having three girls, even my oldest is 25 now, and she was more quiet, more reserved. very strong leader, but in a very calm way. And she's less quiet and far more bold because she's got confidence now. And it took her going head to head with a professor in college one day. She played soccer. I'm going to preface that. She was a collegiate athlete. They were getting ready to start their presentations, and her male professor said to her, "Don't ever wear a ponytail. That is so not professional." And she called me. She goes, "Mom, I actually just had a male professor tell me it's unprofessional to have my hair in a ponytail." She asked some questions as to why this was wrong, whatever. You couldn't answer them. She got more confidence. We've all had those. We just might not leverage that.
Yes. Let's switch gears here a little bit. And I'd like to have you share a bit about some of the innovations that your organization is making in the space of being able to understand the heartbeat and pulse of your workforce at Perceptyx. And I've recommended this 1,000 times 15, 20 years ago. I was like, why don't we do a small pulse survey like attached to the timesheet or something like that for just a sample of your employees, but do it monthly. You see that ebb and flow of the overall organizational health. And they all were like, people get survey fatigue. You don't need to know that much. It doesn't change that fast. That was me being disruptive. You guys have gone and done it. So tell us a little bit about that and how that is both disrupting and enabling the workplace.
Definitely the events that happened in 2020 advanced the necessity in organizations to be more deliberate and thoughtful about employee listening or this concept of continuous listening. Even during that period of time, the advancements in listening were wonderful. We saw our customers listening more and more frequently. They were listening in different ways. They were asking different questions, which is wonderful. But the advancement of biannual, semi-annual engagement surveys to continuous listening is not valuable if you're not doing it for the right reasons. And there's never been a larger opportunity than there is right now for artificial intelligence or AI to start closing the gap between listening or the insights. Let's be honest, listening, you're gathering insights. That's exactly what it is.
The output is insight.
Exactly. But there's an opportunity now to take those insights and move to action. And as I think about just the way we do things at Perceptyx, it is different. We start with the end in mind. Our goal is to truly help CEOs, CHROs, CFOs realize measurable impact in their business. We want to help organizations really start to determine what is that tangible impact against key people initiatives that deliver an exceptional employee experience, which ultimately then drive significant and sizable business outcomes. Through our technology, through AI, other things, we can start to close that gap between insights and actions. And in order to get to measurable impact, we actually have to understand what actions do we need to take. We need to make sure that we're using AI specifically because it tailors specific action-oriented recommendations. We just acquired a company called Humu about 2 months ago that does intelligent nudging. And the reason that piece is so important is through AI actions that are tailored or through coaching or through these nudges, you can actually start to inspire people and influence change. In order to get to measurable impact, we have to make sure we're taking those intelligent action steps to drive that. In order to take those action steps, we have to be focused on our insights. And to do that, you need to be gathering data on a more regular basis and leveraging those analytics that you get from your people to then proactively identify what those areas are across the organization that can have material change when invested in. And that all starts with listening. But if you start with listening, it's hard to get to measurable impact because you start down a path, not really sure where you want to go. And that's really the AI insights engine that Perceptyx has and is continuing to build now. As we start with how are we going to drive measurable impact? Where do we need to go for intelligent action? What are the insights that we need to focus on? And that all starts with the listening experience.
Some things just don't change, right? You got to begin with the end in mind, and then you can do first things first. Maybe some listening needs to be done to jumpstart it and get some discovery going, start breaking and challenging some assumptions or biases about what's going on in the workplace. It's just approached by a prospective client that said, "Hey, we want to do an engagement survey. Do you guys do that? Could you do that for us?" And I respectfully was like, "I'm happy to talk with you about this, but I don't think you want a survey. I think you want results." We're in the business of helping you achieve results. There may be multiple mechanisms that provide those insights, but at the end of the day, if you don't do anything with those insights, you're not focused on how to apply those, you're wasting your time and your money, and you're going to be aggravating your teams. That's our tagline: accelerate the changes you seek, not just do what you ask, because that may or may not be what it takes to get you what you seek. I also like how you're talking about this notion of nudges. How does nature move things? It doesn't typically use dynamite. There's a big buildup and then we blow it up. And it's really exciting. But at the end of the day, it only produces so much of a hole in a mountain. But a river just steadily working its way through will carve the deepest valleys you can imagine. And I think that's the same thing with behavior change. More frequent, regular nudge and reminders, that's what actually stimulates and accelerates behavior change versus one big training or one big shouting match. That might shift things in the moment, but they're going to revert to that norm because you're going against 20, 30, 40 years of habit. So I like both of those dimensions that you're describing there, Lisa.
Given how work is done today and the flow of work and the speed of change that is happening, people can't find or can't justify stepping away and investing enormous amounts of time on going to learnings or trainings or webinars. And the thing that I love about the intelligent, personalized nudging that Perceptyx is now able to do is it happens in the context of work. It happens in the flow of work. It's looking at you and how you are working and the interactions that you're having. It's personalizing and tailoring that nudge to me in the context of my work.
Lisa, could you walk us through a user story here? What's a use case of how this applies? Tell us about what that looks like.
I'll use a prime example. For me, I am a person who, by nature, spends significantly more time with the leaders on my team who get it, who want to move fast. Don't send me an email that has 3 paragraphs. After the first sentence, I'm done. So tell me in the subject line what you need from me and then give me the fluff later. So here at Perceptyx, we use different technology platforms to collaborate and communicate. And with our intelligent nudging capability, it actually has a way of looking at and is connected to my interactions via Slack, email, etc. And one of the examples that I got nudged on probably a month after I was here is, Lisa, you respond on average 2.5 times faster with these 3 leaders than you do with these 4 leaders. I looked at my interactions and they were right. When certain leaders would Slack me and say, I need your opinion on this, or I would love for you to provide some recommendations, my response time to them was significantly faster than these other individuals.
There's a higher affinity to a shared communication style. It's easier to communicate in that language. So the energy flows there more naturally.
Yes. And this one is actually this week. So I've spent a lot of time with my team going over our 2024 fiscal plan, what our short and long range strategies look like, what the people focus is going to be next year. Our nudging capability connects to our insights. And so on my team's survey results from our last listening experience, one of the things that our team scored a little bit lower on was fully understanding our vision. I recognize that what's in my head makes entire sense to me and a small group of people, but for others, doesn't. And so actually this week, I got a nudge that said, don't take it for granted that your team understands my vision. Basically, in my next one-on-one, take some time to walk through it with each person and make sure that they're aligned. I would have never done that if I hadn't have gotten that nudge. And I got that nudge because we know that on my team, understanding our vision and strategy was an area that was a little softer for us. And that's my responsibility as a leader.
Yeah, it starts with you. That's fabulous. Great example, and one that is also near and dear to our heart. Well, Lisa, let's wrap this up. This has been an amazing conversation. You're talking about the examples of how AI is being incorporated to be able to really actually enhance the humanity and the equity of our interactions, which, of course, the great fear out there is that, no, it's going to destroy our humanity and it's going to really polarize the world even more than it is today. Tell us your take on what leaders can be looking for, which AI types of opportunities should be capturing their interest, and how to best harness it, as you said earlier, to be able to elevate us out of the mundane and the menial and into the more creative and humanistic aspects of our work.
I'm just going to share this quick example. I have been asked 6 times in the last 2 months to provide commentary in articles in respected HR magazines about the necessity for compliance around things like AI, chat GPT, et cetera. And it's interesting to me that we want to start with that. How do we put rules and regulations around something most people don't actually understand quite yet and how it works in the organization? But we're starting with creating a box around what we will let people do and not do, right? Versus let's figure out the use cases for it and then start to determine what kind of guidance do we need to provide and how we are going to position either AI, specifically chat GPT or other elements of generative AI in the workplace. So that would be my first ask of any HR leader or compliance leader. Like, don't just rush to put your box around it and put your compliance hat on. Start with understanding how this can help reduce the high volume, low value work that your people do. And think about talent acquisition. How much of what your talent acquisition team does right now is transactional and tactical, from writing job descriptions or job questionnaires, from making sure the job is leveled appropriately, like getting it posted in the right places. This is a very simple place where if you aren't doing AI anywhere else and doing it like we're doing it, start there. Leverage AI to actually intelligently build those job descriptions for you, to automatically level the jobs for you, for it to tell you where to place the job based on the profile of the type of person that you're recruiting for and where those people live in the internet universe. Start small and then start to work your way into things. But there are some really awesome things that can be done now where we can leverage generative AI to help us build marketing proposals. I sit on the board for a really cool biomedical PR advertising full service marketing organization. And they found ways to use AI to actually start replacing some of the human parts of building the marketing plans, being able to grab enormous amounts of data, collect them, analyze them, and produce them into a beautiful presentation in 30 minutes versus 15 hours. You're eroding our financial model because we're charging 15 hours of professional services to do that, and you just did it in 30 minutes. Do we need to charge 30 hours for professional services to do that? Or can you shift that time to go do more high value consulting with them, not generation of content?
Yeah, that is a great articulation of the opportunity and the mindset shift. This has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you being a stand for that provocative, bold, courageous leadership for any gender, for that matter, really, but particularly on behalf of those three amazing daughters of yours. Lisa, thank you again for being so generous with your time and for providing some really awesome nuggets. Throw the boxes out, give us a blank slate to play with, and create possibilities for both our teams and our families. Really appreciate your time here with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.